Today, technology is increasingly getting unionized, but will that foster or slow innovation?
And then it has been 3 years since folks gathered for South by Southwest in Austin. We have sent our intrepid reporter to try the barbecue.
And TikTok is the front line and center of the war in Ukraine, with complicated and mixed results.
I'm Laura Fitton. This is Feature Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Laura.
Hey, it's daylight savings time day, isn't it?
So it is, and I am in Austin, so I'm on a different time zone than you, and I'm on a laptop computer in a hotel room. So our intrepid listeners and viewers will hopefully tolerate our technology drama. That being said, though, we actually have a lot to talk about. It's a busy week we have.
There's a lot going on.
We're going to do 3 chapters in today's pod. We're going to start just looking at what's going on in unionization. There's a couple of stories there. Then we're going to jump to Austin, and I'll give you the update on what I've seen on day one and what the place feels like and what I think the future of this conference and other conferences are. And then last but not least, TikTok and the war in Ukraine. Fascinating story, breaking news there. So if you're going to tune out in the middle of the pod, you're going to miss the big headlines that are going to come 2/3 in. But I want to start with this unionization thing. So let me start by asking you a question, and it's a loaded question. So I'm going to ask it on purpose. Like, are you pro-union?
Yes.
So that's an easy answer, right? I mean, what reasonable thinking person is not in favor of workers having rights and not being? Yeah.
Well, I'm also pro-union, having worked an enormous event in Boston for 8 years, where our unions for events are tough, and it makes costs very So I've seen the downside of unions too, but how can you sit in a world today where these bazillionaire oligarchs from all countries are controlling so much of the wealth, and real wages, working conditions, safety, healthcare, housing, childcare are just abysmal, right? They haven't tracked with inflation. They haven't tracked with time. So are unions perfect? No, but workers need a lot more say in how our economy works. I like ownership even better, honestly, but.
So what's interesting about this Gothamist article is essentially the headline is Amazon, Starbucks, and REI, a new crop of NYC union organizing may be having a moment. And interestingly enough, the headline doesn't mention, but if you read into the body of the story, the New York Times, which is maybe the most interesting from our listeners' standpoint, that New York Times tech workers have unionized. I guess my question is, so for example, I know that there's a history of Starbucks having really bad practices about making people do doubles and triples and close the store and then open the store 4 hours later and reschedule people, and kind of like your manager says you have tomorrow off. No, you don't have tomorrow off. Like there's been a lot of stories about automation treating hourly workers with particular mistreatment. And I know this was a couple of years ago, but I presume it isn't dramatically different. I guess I wonder, as a manager and a former startup guy, and I wonder whether or not there ends up being a conflict between the company and the employees that sometimes is necessary and sometimes creates obstacles and barriers that slow innovation. I guess that's maybe my open question is, how would my startups have done if my team was unionized?
You know what really slows innovation? The Great Resignation. Right? The imbalance between what's going on with management, what's going on with owners, and what's going on with the actual people who do the bulk of a lot of the work that keeps our economy going is coming out in many different ways that are negatively impacting the economy. And if we can get these jobs to be better, more people will want to do them, and will want to do them more innovatively. I hear what you're saying. And I'm not even calling you out. I'm just kind of calling the industry out. It feels like what I was hearing 15 years ago. It feels like what I was hearing 15 years ago in tech about, gosh, we can't figure out how to get companies to not be run by all white males, right? oh, we don't want to lower the bar for hiring. We don't want to slow innovation. And the data shows that diverse businesses are so much more productive, innovative. They do better as businesses. So, yeah, are unions perfect? No. But it kind of reminds me of the affordable housing arguments in my town, which, happen all the time being a Boston suburb. There's people complaining about this one state law that lets these like really not that great developments get built. They're called 40Bs. But it would be impossible for any developer to build any 40B in our town if we would just simply build enough affordable housing, right? So people like to rant and rave about the union instead of just making the jobs better. So the union isn't even needed.
So I want to just say, we have a bunch of live listeners as well as our podcast listeners. If you're listening to the pod live and you want to jump in with a question, just add it into the comments. And hold on. As I say that, one pops up. So let me just.
Hello, fabulous. Hi, Elliot.
It's Elliot. So Elliot, you're back on the road. All of my friends are slowly getting back on the road, which we're going to talk about South by in a few minutes. But all right, so this piece of the union conversation is an article that basically the headline is talking about Israeli tech versus Israeli unions, which I have to say that's going to be a battle of the titans. You don't ever want to be in the middle of an Israeli argument. Like you just want to basically hand in the towel. But the Israeli tech scene is incredibly exuberant and red hot. I do wonder whether, I guess the biggest question, for our listeners and for people that are building tech companies and for the future is, are these individual union stories, whether it be the Israeli story or the New York Times story or the Starbucks story or the Amazon story, are they pockets of union organizing or are they a trend? Are you going to see, will it roll out from New York, which is where it's all beginning, other than the Israel story? And I don't know the answer to that.
I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I hope it's a trend because I do think we need more power given to labor. On the other, I hope it's not a trend because I hope companies wake up, make the jobs better, right? This solves for Great Resignation. This solves for, the rise of unions. Unions can't get a hold if workers aren't facing some really serious blockages, right? They took the job. They want to do a good job. They want to be happy. They want to make a basic living for their family. You look at so many huge companies, Walmart, one of the biggest employers in the US, like in most states and biggest overall. And yet a huge number of their employees need food stamps after working 40 hours a week. Come on.
Yeah. I'm among other things, I think that the relationship with China and Walmart's fascinating too. Like, it's part of why I think if you're trying to figure out the whole, Russia-China alignment, China has a different set of issues than Russia does because essentially their economic output, is tied to Walmart, which is tied to the U.S., which is tied to consumers. Like, we'll get to the Ukraine story. All right, let's do a fun one as our second chapter. I want to talk to you about South by. So, first of all, 2 years. I'm a South by regular. I think this is I was trying to figure it out last night. 12th year, 13th year. I've been on panels. I did a book launch here. It really is my family. I love it here. I love the people. I can walk down the halls and just, find amazing people everywhere. And I did. But that being said, though, I was trepidatious about coming back. And you and I talked about this. It's like, are we ready? Are we ready in terms of health? And then are we ready also just in terms of being back in big crowds of people after having been in our hidey hole for the last 2 years?
And the trans youth rights.
And the trans youth rights. Although I had a long conversation at dinner last night about that. And the decision, I spoke to an Austin native about that last night. And her position was the way we fight that is by having economic impact and by having people like you here. Not by people not coming.
And Sarah Lacey made a great point in her newsletter that those trans laws are coming up in so many states. It's not just Texas, unfortunately. Anyway, back to you.
So I want to share some pictures, in part because it'll be fun, and in part because it'll give me a chance to talk a little bit about what went on yesterday. So let's see if this all works. I think it does. So to begin with, the energy level at South by, for the people that are here, it's definitely back. There is no doubt that people are glad to be here, and the sense of wacky Austin is very much in the air. I saw this thing at the airport, and for our listeners, I'll describe it, and you can tell me what to make of it. There's a sign at the airport, and it says Department of Aviation, Robert Mueller Conference Room. What is that? What happens in the Robert Mueller Conference Room? Do you want to be invited to a meeting in the Robert Mueller Conference Room?
It does sound scary.
And did anyone think that putting that in the airport was ironic on about 19 levels? Like,
maybe someone's trying to be, counterculture.
That's interesting. Oh, you think it's ironic? Well, that's a better answer.
Or they're like, hey, we're watching you. We're going to hold you accountable. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm sure there's a story.
Yeah. I don't know. All I can tell you is I landed in Austin. That was the first thing I saw, and I was like, okay, what else has changed? All right. So for our listeners, I ran it wasn't really a panel. It was a keynote presentation yesterday. When you come to South by, when you're a speaker, you really have no idea whether you're on the good part, what part of the schedule you're on, because you don't know who's against you. You don't know how many people are going to be in. It was unclear to me whether or not we were going to be in an empty room or not. That being said, the speaker was my friend and colleague, Evan Shapiro. And I don't know if you know Evan, but he's amazing. I mean, he ran IFC, he ran Sundance, he ran, all kind. He was, on the creative team on Portlandia. He was executive producer of my film, The Outsider. But he's doing this thing called the Media Map, which he started about a year and a half ago, in which he maps all of the changing valuations of the big media companies. And he's really brilliant. And so he held court for an hour in this reasonably packed conference room in the Austin Convention Center, talking about how the planetary changes going on with these companies. And there were all kinds of headlines that came out of it. People were taking notes furiously. But like, for example, he was talking about why Roku's valuation dropped precipitously 3 days ago. And the answer is, everyone agrees that the era of the dongle is over, and that Roku's whole business of being a dongle you plug into your TV is being replaced by TVs that have smart programming built into them. And Roku had been doing deals to get Roku inside of all these flat screens. And Google just came and kind of bigfooted them and took away a great big TV manufacturer deal, which is now going to be, Google. I didn't know any, and this is the great thing about South by, which is you get really smart people on the stage in an audience of really smart people, and they're generous with their time. They share information that they wouldn't have necessarily written on a blog post or, put in an article. And the audience was very, very engaged. It got very interactive. People started kind of hollering out questions from the audience, and the whole thing turned a little sideways, but in a good way, like in a old-fashioned South by kind of like raucous way. And that made me happy. Here, wait, I'll show you some pictures, and you'll immediately see what I mean.
Are you seeing a more inclusive South by, or is it still, more white males than not leading everything? What do you think?
So I took a 4 a.m. flight yesterday out of New York. I got out just before the snow. landed at 10, got to my hotel room, got to the room, set up the AV, which was complicated, got the camera crews positioned, got Evan set. Like literally didn't get to see or do anything other than to walk to and from the conference center, and then pick up my badges, which is always, there's always that.
Oh, I just mean
So,
the speaker roster.
My immediate kind of like back of the envelope answer is diversity in terms of men and women, but still predominantly white. And again, South by's tricky because there's the comedy festival, the film festival, there's EDU, but that's earlier, and then there's tech. So, if you walk the halls, some of the diversity is the film community is more multicultural than the tech community. And it's hard to know exactly the difference.
Again, 8 years putting together a huge conference. It's something, you really need to be leading that from stage. And if you're not, why not? That's always been my take on South by. And they have made improvements. I think I started going in 2008, probably was my first year. So it's getting better. But I was hoping to be a quantum leap this year because the world we left when South by last convened in 2019 and the world we're in 2022 has jumped. And, South by is about the future. So I hope they get there.
So a couple of things. After it was off for 2 years, there was a moment in my brain where I thought maybe none of these conferences come back. Maybe we all are just trapped in our hidey holes, and maybe we never return to being in person. After yesterday, I can tell you absolutely, I will be coming next year.
Oh, good, because that would break my heart. I love South by Southwest so much, so amazing things. Many amazing things have happened in my life there. I'm glad it's happening. There's no way I could have been there, but I'm glad it's happening.
So I think the answer is that when again, still day 2, so check with me in a couple of days, but I would say the numbers are down. It's a little thinner, for a variety of reasons, just people getting back on airplanes. And then there was horrible snow out of New York. And so a whole bunch of flights got canceled. That being said, I think what I learned in the last 2 years is the importance of physicality. I mean, I went to a speaker's dinner last night, 20 people in the room, had 5 or 6 amazing conversations. There is something about being in a room with 4 walls and a set of stairs or whatever leading up to that. Everyone in that room is there for a reason. We all share some interests. But I was talking to people about space travel. I talked to somebody who's a senior person at Staples about retail. I talked to somebody else about data security. I talked to somebody at Amazon. I mean, it was as diverse and interesting a group of people, and significantly more women than men.
I was gonna say, was it really diverse? Like, who's in the room? Who gets to sit at those tables is the thing I am, right?
60 to 70% women.
It's not the only question.
Not in terms of LGBTQ, unknown to me. That in terms of people of color, not as many.
Right. And I think it is on people who look like me to sit down in those rooms and ask, why does this room look like it does? So anyway, I'm it because those conversations are amazing, and we need to figure out how to let all the brilliance of the world, all the brilliant minds that are out there, be part of those conversations. And I know you're in favor of that.
No. I guess my point is just in terms of physicality. I don't think that set of connections was going to happen on Zoom. That was my point.
Totally agree.
All right. So now let's get to this TikTok war story, which you found a breaking news story that I did not even know about, which so talk a little about that. I'll pull up the screen and then we can dig into some of the other things that are going on.
Popped up in my feed last night. I am not a Washington Post subscriber. I subscribe to like 3 other things, but not that one. So I have not read the article in full transparency, but I read the tweets. And this is Taylor Lawrence she had the scoop, breaking a story that the White House is formally briefing TikTokers. And my reaction was like, hell yeah, why not? And of course, the ensuing conversation about it on Twitter was like, "Oh, it's so stupid to be spending White House resources on it was like, get off my lawn types of people." And then there were the smart people who are like, "Hey, see this video?" And they threw up this, amazing, brilliant woman just going on about the war in the way she speaks to her audience. It had 19 million views, right? And you compare that to traditional media, and it can't compete. So, I think TikTok's really important. And I'm glad the White House is savvy to that and equipping these media creators, which is what they are, with the information they need to, like, this is not a solvable war from a military standpoint. The only solution for this war is going to be culture wide, right? Economy, human to human, tech. We've just all got to come play here. There's something called 1920.in. This lets you text an individual Russian person. I think of my Russian woman selling cassette tapes in the 90s behind me, right? These are strong people and they deserve the truth. And so I think TikTok is a fantastic way to get stuff in there. Now, of course, there's also disinformation on TikTok, so we got to be fighting that front too.
Well, and TikTok is owned by the Chinese.
Yeah.
Unclear how TikTok went from being an enemy of the people under Trump or whatever drama he was pulling to now essentially being the world's largest distributor of news and information kind of overnight.
I was a lot more worried about, oh my God, it's all owned by China 2-3 years ago. And they could still pull stuff, but it has proven itself. It has flexed its muscles as a place where global movements form, especially for the generations that are coming up behind us.
So here's what I'd like to know the answer to, and maybe some of our listeners can, send us a tweet if they know the answer or a private message. Who in the White House is strategizing this social media output? Because I think it's very smart and not conventional thinking on a bunch of levels.
I think, I was reading his tweets last night, at least he was clearly involved and he was from the White House. I'm not sure if he's in charge of it, but I did not recollect his name because it was very late. But he's in the thread with Taylor. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, I mean, Biden also did a sit-down interview with, her name is just slipping my mind from
Heather?
lack of sleep. What?
Heather?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought was also very surprising.
No, I think this is a White House that understood how it got where it got. During the campaign, there was a lot of fantastic influencer outreach. I was part of a couple groups that, don't officially exist, so I can't tell you about them because they didn't happen, that were just independently organized by influencers who brought their friends together and then, kind of reached out to get information and share it with each other. I think this is a, very social media savvy, very media savvy administration. And I think that's great because that's the world we're in. And, unfortunately, with so much disinformation warfare coming, again, I sound paranoid every time I say it, but every week that goes by, I sound a little less paranoid. So much of that disinformation being funded, produced, and driven by Russia and the Kremlin. And they are very good at disinformation.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is there's a cadre of US-based, libertarian billionaire families. I mean, where is Rebecca Mercer in all of this? I mean, I think it would probably be good to know the answer to.
Sorry, as I was looking for that tweet, I'm sorry to interrupt you. SNL actually riffed off this story for the cold open, off the White House briefing TikTokers.
Well, I was out with a whole cadre of folks that we both know when Saturday Night Live was on, but I will take a look. Well, listen, so here's what I will promise, all of you people that are not in Austin. By this time next week, I will have a coherent answer to the question on a scale of 1 to 10. Was it a 2 or was it a 9? I will be able to get you some updates on barbecue because a barbecue research trip is definitely in the offing. I've had 2 food truck meals so far, which I have to say were not awesome, which made me sad.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
sad.
I mean,
What about
yeah, I
breakfast
mean,
tacos?
breakfast tacos are on the agenda. It is early here, and I'm still pre-caffeinated, so I will report on breakfast tacos as well. Uh, with that, we are out of time. It's nice to have you all here and with us, and we will be back again next week. See you later.